Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of the Sfarim Chatter podcast. On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined by Rabbi Notis, who works for Scroll, and he's the Mechaber of a number of Sfarim, including a sefer in Hebrew, Chikrei Ahron, on some various halachic sugis, and as well as the book/sefer that we'll be discussing in this episode, which is The Great Zmanim Debate, the history, the science, and the lumdis of Zmanim, published by Mosaica Press. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by 1010 Watches. When making this podcast and turning back the clock on history, I can't help but gaze upon my wrist and notice my exquisite timepiece that I recently purchased at 1010 Watches. Carrying an array of fine timepieces, their various brand selection and styles guarantee you'll find something to suit your watch purchasing needs. At 1010 Watches, we let time do the talking. You can find their phone number information in the show's notes, and it's appropriate that they're sponsoring an episode that's all about Zmanim. So, Rabbi Notis, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so let's start off. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
My father was a Rabbi in Tel Yeshiva for almost 50 years. Harini Kaparas Mishkava. I'm Tech Shana for right now. And so I grew up in the village of Tel Yeshiva. As I went to Yeshiva, I went to Mesivta and Beis Medrash there till I went to Eretz Yisrael. I learned by Rabbi Meshua for 2.5 years. And I learned in Lakewood for many, many years. That's my background.
So how'd you become interested in Zmanim? I know some people are interested in Zmanim more than others. They have a natural aptitude for Zmanim, and it's almost like math. It's like scary type of thing. But how'd you become interested in Zmanim?
So let me tell you something interesting about my sefer. Everyone says it's a sefer on Zmanim. To me, it's not really a sefer on Zmanim. It's a sefer on astronomy. And what really interests me was the astronomy. Now, it did start a lot from learning the sugyas of Zmanim. And when I learned the sugyas of Zmanim, I realized that there's a lot of astronomy that I need to know, that people don't know, and I can't even find anyone that explains it. One of the most basic sources about Zmanim is the Bir Agra. Bir Agra explains that you have to calculate it by Ofek. Now, what is Ofek? I didn't even know what that means. How do you calculate it? What is that? And I didn't really find anyone else that explains that well. So I had to make my own research. But once I started researching that, I came across, I had to actually sit down and learn some astronomy. Astronomy is a fascinating topic. And it's not only relevant to Zmanim, it's relevant to many sugyas in Shas. You can't understand even the basic, what's Avodas Kochav Umazalas, worshiping planets and the mazalas and the constellations. What's it all about? Unless you know something about astronomy, you don't even know what that means. There's so many sugyas. Of course, Kiddush HaChodesh, you can't really learn Masechtas Rosh Hashanah without really knowing some astronomy. You have to not only know how the moon moves, but the way the moon was measured against the constellations, the way people looked for the moon and measured its passage against the constellations. You have to know something about astronomy. So I really began to study astronomy. And to me, what's unique about the sefer is trying to give a yeshiva man, a ben Torah, some education in astronomy. If you know astronomy, then the sugya Zmanim is not so complicated anymore. So I would say that what really brought me to make the sefer is having learned some astronomy just because I needed to know it for sugyas and learning, and realizing there is no sefer that explains the basics of astronomy, and it is a fascinating topic that helps anybody not only understand Gemara, but it's in the Rambam says it brings to Avas Hashem. Chavos Alav speaks so much about learning some astronomy. It brings to Avas Hashem. So it's a very important topic that people don't know enough about, and that's really, to me, the sefer is an astronomy sefer.
Okay, and that's something we're going to discuss here shortly. So you were from Cleveland, as you mentioned, and in Cleveland, I'm sure it's not like Lakewood today. You had some secular subjects, some English education. Did you learn astronomy when you were younger, or this was something, like you said, you got into Zmanim and you're like, whoa, I need to learn this whole new subject that I knew nothing about?
I knew very little about it, but I will say I did get from Tel Yeshiva, I would say, give enough secular education that I could read a book. I didn't go to any formal school to learn astronomy. I just took out some books and I bought a couple books and I read them. So, so two things I got from my education, not as directly astronomy, but his ability to reading comprehension. I could take out a book and read it and know what it says. And curiosity. You have to develop that when you're in high school, when you're a teenager, to be interested in things like science and the world around you and the Bria. If you're curious and you can read, you can learn anything.
So as you said, the Sefer, the book, we'll call it the book, it's in English, is one of astronomy. And that's really the place to start. Although it's called the Great Zmanim Debate, and we want to get there to the debate with Zmanim. Everyone knows, very familiar with different Zmanim. Of course, 72 or not. We're going to get there. We'll get there later on the podcast. But we'll do here, as you do in the book, which makes sense, is let's explain the basics of astronomy. We can't begin to have this conversation and to understand what Zmanim are if we don't understand the basics of astronomy. And this is something that you do in the book, and I think it's worthwhile to start off here to explain to the listeners the terminology. As you mentioned some of it, when you go through Chazal, you hear Tkufas, you hear Galgalachama, Ofek, Rakia, Neshef. I mean, you hear terms that people are familiar with, Shkia, Beneshmashe, Setzek Chavim. But what do these terms mean? Start explaining at least an overview, even if we're not going to go as in depth as the book does, is what do these terms mean before we begin to explore the Zmanim and the various opinions in the Zmanim debate?
Okay. So actually, the first chapter of the book, and it's divided into sections. The first section is on astronomy, and the first chapter on astronomy is Tekufos. Starts off with the famous Gemara in Shabbos. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Mishum bar Kapara, Kol hayadei l'chashev b'tkufos u'mazalis, ve'eino chayeshev, olav hakaso eimer, es poel Hashem lo yabitu, u'ma'as yadav lo yiro. That a person, Chazal tell us, a person that has the ability to calculate tkufos and mazalis, and he doesn't do so that the Navi Yeshaya, he is included in Navi Yeshaya's criticism. There's an amazing world out there. Every day we can just look up and see so many amazing things. And if we don't pay attention to it, we don't think about it, so the Navi criticizes us. So what are the two things? Tkufos and mazalis. And the Rambam says, if you study these things, you pay attention to them, it brings to Avas Hashem. Today, people hear about astronomy. They think, oh, no, this has something to do with some advanced, with telescopes and things. I don't have to know about this. Yeah, you don't have to know about the things that are discovered by NASA. Maybe you don't have to know about that. But the basic of Tkufos and Mazalos, which is basically paying attention to the amazing Bria and the Chachma, the wisdom and the kindness of Hashem, that's apparent from it, that is incumbent on every person. A person who doesn't do that, he's not paying attention to the work of Hashem. And the expression of the pasuk, Poel Hashem layabit u'ma'aseh yadav l'ro. So there's Poel and Ma'aseh yadav means like this: everything in the world is created with tremendous wisdom. Here we're talking about, let's say, the sun. The sun is enormous wisdom. But besides the enormous wisdom of each thing, everything is set up in a way that it brings to so many amazing kindness and functions. When we talk about the Tkufos, for example, we're talking about the way that the motion of the sun changes over the seasons. So that has an unending amount of effects. It affects the weather, it affects the wind, it affects the heat, affects the growing season, and therefore it affects the plants and the animals and the bugs and the birds. It affects, and it goes on and on and on, and all the things many of the things that generate life are actions that come from some of the amazing things that Hashem made. So if you look at it itself, you see the wisdom of it, and if you ponder it, you see the Ma'aseh Yadav, you see that the pile, how that wisdom affects so many different things, so many steps. There's so much detail that we just take advantage. It really comes from a tremendous wisdom. So actually, the Chavos speaks about this. Of course, the Rambam speaks about this. But this pasuk, it's worth just sharing a little thought about this pasuk. The beginning of this pasuk in Yeshaya of Pa'al Hashem lo yabet u'ma'aseh yadav le'ro. The pasuk, the beginning of the pasuk is I can't more or less V'haya chinor v'novel toif v'cholol v'yayin mishdayan v'as Pa'al Hashem lo yabet u'ma'aseh yadav le'ro. So the pasuk contrast says that they were busy with music and alcohol, and they didn't ponder the wonders of Hashem's creation. So, according to the Vilna Gaon, this means like this: the world that we live in, if we're not connected to Hashem, if we don't realize the kindness of creation, the wisdom of it, we don't understand our place in it, then we don't really have an avas Hashem. We don't really know what we're doing here. We don't have a meaningful life. Life without meaning is depressing. The only way to deal with life without meaning is music and alcohol. Music and alcohol drown out our depression from a meaningless life. The alternative to that is to ponder the wonders of Hashem. Just pondering it, spend a little time thinking about the amazing world we live in. It opens a person's mind and heart to see that he's living in a Hashem's amazing world, full of Hashem's kindness, and he sees the Hashem's enormous greatness, and from that he sees Hashem's love, and he feels the love. That's the joy that a person has. That's the simcha that a person has from pondering the Maisa of Hashem and the Pa'al of Hashem. So that's and like the Chavos says, the first step in the ladder is tkufas. So the book starts off with tkufas. What are tkufas? So we all know that there's 4 seasons to the world, to the year. Now the 4 seasons of the year are the result of the change of the path of the sun. If a person doesn't pay any attention, he thinks the sun is just every day rising and setting the same way. Now, if you pay a little attention, you see that that's not what happens. If you just look every morning, people that are in tune to nature, they see the sun does not rise the same place every day. The position that the sun rises changes from day to day to day. Or over the course of one season, it moves north, then it moves south, and moves further south, and moves back north. The way the sun moves, the path of the sun during the day, is also not simple. We think that just the sun goes up overhead and sets. No, the sun moves in a curve, in a southward curve. It rises, and then it curves southward, and then it moves back towards the north. That curve changes every day. How high the sun reaches in the middle of the day changes over the course of the season. The same with the pattern of 4 seasons. Those 4 seasons that we see them in plant and the way things grow and the weather, but that's the effect of the changes of the path of the sun over the course of the 4 years. That is what the tkufas are. So tkufas are measured by paying attention to the path of the sun and being able to. There's a ways to measure that and to see how the change of the sun also is reflected. The yearly changes of the sun are reflected in the constellations that the sun stands by. So this is such a basic idea. The constellations are such a basic idea in Chazal that it's hard to really be educated Talmud Chacham, to be a Talmud Chacham. You don't even know what are the constellations. What does it mean that the sun is changing its position in the constellations? So these are the things that I'm not going to stay over the whole first chapter, but that's what kufas are about. And it's not a modern science. It's something that was studied, way back, by not just the Chazal and the Tanaim. It comes back from the Babylonians. We have records, and it's the basis of our understanding It's the beginning of our understanding of our peak into the wisdom of the Bria. That's Tkufis.
The equinox.
The equinox, the two equinox. So twice a year there's equinox. That means that the sun, as the position of sunrise moves further north, the day gets longer. The path of the sun is a longer curve. So that then during the course of the summer, the path of the sun gets further and further north, and the day gets progressively longer until you get to the longest day in the middle of the summer. That's the solstice, and then it goes the other direction until the fall. So when the point when the day and the night are even, that's the sun's average path. That's the equinox. So there's two equinoxes. In the spring, there's an equinox, and then it gets longer before it gets shorter again. And then in the fall, there's another equinox where the day gets even before it gets shorter in the winter, and then it gets back to the equinox in the spring.
Okay, then we get to Galgal HaChama in the summer and the winter solstice. You can explain about that. And
okay.
I should say also that anyone who has the book, who wants to check out the book, there are many diagrams and some old pictures and diagrams and things like that throughout the book for those that can guide you and help you see some of this. So this is an audio medium, and Rabbi Notis is doing a great job explaining, but there's also, for those that want visual, you can check out the book and I help you along to understand some of these concepts.
Yeah, the diagrams are a very important part of the book because a lot of these things, a lot of these ideas, they're abstract. They're hard to just understand them without a picture and a diagram. There is, I must say, there's, for the terms, to help. There's a glossary in the back. Some people may not be familiar right away with the terms. The terms are explained, and there's a glossary. You don't need to have any background in astronomy. Hopefully, by the time you finish the book, you'll know something about astronomy, and it'll inspire some curiosity, and there's a lot more to learn. But you could start the book without any knowledge of astronomy, and you'll know some interesting things. So let's get to Galgal HaChama, like you said. So the Chazal talk about Galgal, number of places, Galgal HaChama. So to understand what Chazal means, the first step is, well, in the first chapter when we just described what the Tkufas are and how ancient people measured them, the next question is to understand them, is to understand why how are these. All these changes, there's something unified about them. The length of the day, the changing seasons, the different positions of the sun's rising, and the height that it gets in its daily curve. There's something that, it's not a coincidence that they all change at the same tkufis, at the same, over the same 3 months at a time. So ancient people had different theories how to understand that. So today, a lot of people look back and they think, the ideas of, even in the times of Chazal, how they understood the world were so primitive. The truth is, most people today are very, very primitive in their understanding of the natural world. They never even thought about it. One of the questions that's mentioned in Galgal, in the chapter about Galgal HaChama, is, it's such a basic question, and I've asked this to intelligent people, and they're astounded that they don't know how to look at it. Here's a basic question: at night, after sunset, the sky gets dark. The beautiful blue sky gets dark. Why does the sky get dark? Because the sun set below the horizon. The sun should still be shining on the sky above us. The sky is way above us. Just because the sun went below the horizon, why is it not shining on the sky? I asked. That's one of the basic questions that ancient people dealt with in their search to. And they tried to explain this with their ideas of Galgal, with their different models, but they were thinking. And their ideas, their models of Galgal were trying to address very basic questions. People don't even there's basic questions people don't even think about. Like, you think you're so sophisticated, and today we know everything. I'm asking you, why can't the sun still illuminate the sky? Why is it still not bright blue after the sun goes below the horizon? People have a hard time answering that. Well, ancient people thought about a lot of these basic questions that you never even thought about. And they at least had models to try to explain it. So over time, our models improved, and we got a much better understanding. But even just from the basic insight that people gained by analyzing basic questions, it reveals a tremendous wisdom in the Bria. It reveals the enormous size of the Bria, the imponderable wisdom that the Creator had, the unbelievable, the stupendous precision of everything in the Bria. So this is all, like the Rambam says, it brings to Avas HaTorah, but it's our understanding of the astronomy of what's happening with the sun and what's the process why the sky gets dark that is relevant to Zmanim. We can't really understand the whole sugya Zmanim without understanding what is the process that makes the sky dark, because Tzeis HaKochavim is a measure of the darkness of the sky, and Aleis HaShachar is a measure of darkness in the sky, of light in the sky. So to get into the sugya, it's we have to understand the basic process of it. That's discussed in the chapter about Galgal and Ophek. The third chapter is Ophek. That's like we start off. The Rambam says that the Zmanim have to do with the Ophek. So what is the Ophek? It's really it's something it's a bit abstract, and it takes pondering to understand it. The Ophek's really it's horizon. But what is the horizon is such a profound idea that shows so much. One takes a while to grasp it. When you grasp it, it like opens your mind to like, whoa, this is amazing. But the basic idea of it is that anybody anywhere in the world, he looks at himself like he is the center of the universe. The horizon spreads out around him equal distance to the north, south, east, west. He's the middle he is the center of the universe. Doesn't matter who you are, where you are, but if you look out around you, you'll find that you're the center of the universe. And it doesn't matter if you travel somewhere else, somehow you're still the center of the universe. And the reason for that, of course, is because it's you're not the center of anything except you're the center of what you can see. That's what you're the center of. But that fact that you are the center of what you can see, and that is an effect of what you see in the sky. What you see in the sky is different from what other people see in the sky. That is a basic idea of Ophek that's explained in the third chapter of the astronomy section.
And there's a bunch. Like I said, there's a bunch of illustrations and there's a bunch of pictures, including you even have an nice old woodcut illustration of Ptolemy looking at the sky. So you're nice. So the nice. I like it as being someone interested in history, that you bring some old woodcuts or some old illustrations, not only some modern ones that you created, some graphs and charts and things for people to see. Okay, so then we get to Rakia and Neshef, and then we'll get to everyone's terms that everybody knows, definitely thinks they know between Shkia and Benishpashas. But let's first get to just Rakia and Neshef.
Okay, right. So the Rakia is, really the central question is, the day ends at Tzeis HaKochavim, at darkness, and it's a measure of the darkness of the sky. So what's the sky really? And the answer is, the Rambam explains this, but everybody thinks they know this today, but they don't really pay that much attention to it. But the sky is really just the atmosphere around us. The sky, we look up and it seems like there's a big blue sky that stretches out miles and miles everywhere. It's an illusion. It's an optical illusion. There is nothing blue out there. it's that there's about something like 37 miles of atmosphere above us, and the sunlight reflect in that atmosphere. There's like water vapor, there's gases, a lot of water vapor, and as the sunlight goes through the gases and the water vapor in like about 37 miles above us in that atmosphere, it turns blue. What we experience as the rakia, as the sky, is not a tangible thing. It's all an optical illusion. It's the sunlight in the air above us. So as long as the sun is shining through the atmosphere above us, we see a blue sky. And the reason why after the sun goes down, we still see some light in the atmosphere is because even though the curvature of the earth blocks the sun from our view, but if we go 20 miles high, we'd still be able to see the sun. So the sun is not yet blocked from reaching the atmosphere above us. So to really understand what's happening with Zmanim, we got to understand what's the sunlight about that we see in the sky. Why does it get dark gradually? At first glance, you would think either it should just turn off like a switch, or the sun is here or the sun's not here. It's turn the switch on and off. Where does the dimmer come in over here? That it gradually gets dark. So that's explained in the chapter about Rakia. And Kriya and Neshef. Then the next chapter is Neshef, which is related to what we just spoke about. But Neshef delves into the issue of solar depression. That's really the issue that the Vilna Gaon is saying, that's the way the Rambam and Even HaEzer and the early Rishonim, the way they measured Zmanim is with degrees of solar depression. So once we know something about what's going on in the sky and what's the motion of the sun, we put that into understanding why different days and from different latitudes and different places in the world, it'll take a different amount of time for the sky to darken, because the darkness of the sky is related to the solar depression, to how far below the sun, below our horizon the sun is, and the time it takes for the sun from sunset till it reaches any specific degree of solar depression depends on the angle that the sun is moving. The angle the sun is moving depends on the latitude, because a person has a different angle of his horizon depending on his latitude, and it depends on the seasons because the sun moves differently over the course of the seasons. So it for someone who knows no astronomy, it sounds complicated, but it's with the diagrams and the pictures and the charts, it really is not that difficult to figure out. There are actually a couple of points that are a little more difficult, and I warn you that this is for the more advanced. But what's necessary for Zmanim is not that complicated, and like I say, it opens your mind, the whole world of astronomy, and opens your mind to the amazing world that we live in every day.
Yeah, like I say, you don't need to know astronomy before you read this. It's not always necessarily the easiest subject, but it's a very important subject to know, a very important subject. If you're learning Chazal, many Gemaras, you need to know these things. So you really do a good job of breaking it down and giving it over in simple English with, there's diagrams, charts, and pictures and things like that you give it over. So those are the basic terminology. Before we turn to the actual Zmanim debate and the different opinions, which we'll get to, you have a chapter, The Wisdom of Yisachar, which you break down, you talk about the Jews, the Jewish knowledge, the Rabbanim, the Gedolim over the generations of knowing this knowledge. And you talk about Avram Zakuto and it is tables that Columbus used to find America. And you talk about some others. You go through the Ralbag and some others. You talk about others that you want to mention that you talk about here, that those that were famous for their knowledge of astronomy.
Yeah, it's not the topic of the book, of course, but it does add a little juice to it, and it is important to know, that it's important to it's important for two reasons. First of all, is we should realize it's important to have some humility for ourselves. We think that we know so much stuff, and today we know so much science, and says no, we don't know that much. Very few people today know that much what's going on. And people, many generations before us, they knew a lot more just of natural science than the average Talmud Chacham today. No, the big people, they Gedolei Yisrael, that were involved in this Chachma. But it's important for another reason. Actually, the whole story of the first section of astronomy has two purposes. One is you need to know this astronomy to understand Zmanim. But second of all, you have to realize that it is a big chachma, and not everybody knew it. Some people did, and some people didn't. And because as we learn this sugya, we'll see that the Vilna Gaon and the Lavush and others point out that Rishonim made mistakes in astronomy. They don't just say they argue. They say it's a tois. It's absolutely a mistake, and it's hard for us to grasp how Ahronim could say about Rishonim that they made mistakes. That's one of the difficulties of Zmanim, is that you have to face the fact that great Ahronim said about Rishonim that they made mistakes. So it's important to know the history to it, to know that what the astronomy that we know today, it's a great wisdom, and there was great minds and great chacham that were expert at it and wrote svarim on it and were recognized by the whole world for their wisdom. But not everybody knew it, and it's not a criticism of Rishon that he didn't know it. And they explain also how the different locations of the world, some chacham studied this. In some places they studied astronomy and they knew it well. While in other places, even at later times, when maybe like the Rambam and Ibn Ezra were expert in astronomy, but then the Balei Taisis lived in a place at a time they did not have books on astronomy, and they didn't study astronomy. So it's important to the story to know that some people did study astronomy and were expert at it, and some chacham did not have access to it, and they did not know it.
Okay, so let's talk about now, get to the sugya and get to the history of the machlokes, the lamdas, the history. So I want to mention you start off chapter 2, because I think it's very interesting. You're right. Although much ink has been spilled on the sugya of Zmanim, it is neither a lengthy nor a particularly complex sugya. What it is baffling. And you go through a little bit more, and I'll skip ahead to the next chapter, and you say, it is baffling how great minds can argue to such extremes about a matter that is a question of observable physical reality. As we study the arguments and counter-arguments, we will grasp that underlying these arguments are differing views of the motion of the sun. And then you talk about how the background and what we discussed, and those who read the book will enable them to understand the sugya. So, to tell the listeners here, to elaborate a little bit more on that. So you're saying, no, the sugya is not really that complicated. You think, what time is Shabbos over for you? Nah, not really so complicated. Very straightforward. It's only just you have to understand really what's going on. Is that the case? It's really very simple, straightforward sugya?
As far as sugyas go,
yeah, sugya. Yes.
It's not that many sources to it. Most sugyas are, if you, and talking about Hilchos Shabbos, for example, most sugyas in Hilchos Shabbos that touch on so many different sources and so many different points. You have to know different opinions on Einam Mischav and then Psikresha, and there's so many things that are involved in it, and each one of them is so many opinions and there's so many rayas to it that, and most topics that are important topics in Hilchos Shabbos, it's really a big sugya, because you have to know a lot of Gemaras and a lot of Taisus and a lot of machloksim to really dig into it. But as far as sources go, there's not that much Gemara on Zmanim. It's just a couple short Gemaras, and there's a few Taisus in, it's not that much material. It's not that much material. Now, the first, as you explain in the Sefer, the first, really thorough Sefer on the topic is the Minchas Kayin. Minchas Kayin is an amazing Sefer, and it's on 3 topics. The first, the topic is Zmanim, and it's from the 1600s, and first of all, it's set up that basic and chapters, and each chapter starts off the heading what it's about, and methodically goes through the sugya. So the Minchas Kayin, it goes through every part of the sugya. Really, you can really know the sugya from Minchas Kayin, but it does come out really confusing because it's not so many sources, but it has a lot of good questions and a lot of opinions. And you say a lot of perplexing questions, like, how could it be like this? There's so many questions. So it's perplexing because there are all these questions. But the Vilna Gaon really comes along and answers very elegantly the bulk of what bothered the Minchas Kayin and bothered the people before him. And the trick only is to understand what the Vilna Gaon is saying. So again, I say, as far as sources, is how much Gemara and Taisus you have to know to know the sugya. It's not, comparatively, it's not a big sugya.
You mentioned Minchas Kayin. It's worth pointing out something that you pointed out earlier. There were those in different places, different kufas, learned astronomy. The Minchas Kayin lived in Amsterdam. He was from a former converso family, what people know as Marano, Spanish-Portuguese community. He's a Talmud of Rabbi Sholev Mortera. In the community there, he went to the Eitz Chaim Yeshiva in Amsterdam, the famous yeshiva. Discussed that recently on the podcast. So he was in the time and place, different culture. With Dutch, it was a different culture there, and this is something that he learned, that he went through. So we'll get more to him. So let's start off with the basic. You'll at least give the basic background. Turning this into a very in-depth shir, a basic background of the sugya, and of course through as you titled the chapter 7, Rabbeinu Tam, of course, which we have to discuss.
Right. So Rabbeinu Tam's questions, Rabbeinu Tam's stira between the Gemara and Pesachim. Gemara and Shabbos is like the basics of this sugya of Tzeisek HaChavim. The problem is that one Gemara seems to say that Tzeisek HaChavim occurs 3/4 of a mil after Shkia, and another Gemara seems to say it occurs 4 mil after Shkia. That's a huge problem. So Rabbeinu Tam poses this problem that is stira in the Gemara. This is a question that all the Rishonim deal with. They all struggle with this stira. That is the central stira of Zmanim. And Rabbeinu Tam gives a very original answer to this. Now, we'll see, other Rishonim later argue with him. And what was not known to the Bali Taisis was that the Ga'ainim and the Rambam clearly did not worry much about this question. They didn't worry about it. To them, the Gemara in Shabbos that says halacha is 3/4 of a mil is seis. That's what's nagea halacha, and they were not that concerned about the fact that there's a Gemara in Pesachim, which is basically a Gadata Gemara that measures the thickness of the rakia, and from the Gemara that measures the thickness of the rakia, it seems that from Alais Totseis, the Totseis is 4 mil. So they to the Ga'ainim and the Rambam and early Rishonim, there was nothing to talk about. Shkia was sunset. 3/4 of a mil later was Tzeisek HaChavim, was Vade Laila, and they weren't worried that much. They just not concerned about this stira. But the Bali Tais were very concerned with this stira. And Rabbeinu Tam, in order to answer this stira, came up with a chiddush that shkia, there's two shkias. What we normally think of shkia as sunset is one shkia, and then there's another shkia when the sun finishes going through the Ivei HaRakia, the thickness of the Rakia. So according to Rabbeinu Tam's idea that there's two shkias is Mishit Tishkecham, Shkias Hachama. So the Tzeis HaChalam occurs 4 mil after sunset. It's 3/4 of a mil. It occurs 3/4 of a mil after the second Shkia, after the sun finishes going through the Oivei HaRakia, through the thickness of the Rakia. Again, we explained in the first section how they looked at the sky the sky was like a dome, and there was a thickness to it, and the sun has to travel through a window, through the thickness of the Rakia. That's how Rabbeinu Tam looked at it, and and based on his understanding of the motion of the sun, he had this answer that there's 2 shkiyas and seis occurs. So there's a huge difference. It comes out according to Rabbeinu Tam that seis doesn't really occur until 4 mil after sunset. That's the beginning of the real machlokes, the real debate about Zmanim.
The great Zmanim debate. So essentially, is this a machlokes mitzias? And what's actually happening? Is that what they're arguing in?
Well, yeah. There's no question about it that night is when 3 stars come out. There's no question about that. The Gemara learns that from Pasuk in Nehemiah. Till Tzeis HaChalam means 3 stars. And essentially the machlokes is, when do 3 stars come out? Now that seems like such a basic CS question, that how could we have such different answers? Well, the first thing we have to realize is that in Europe, it was not true. Neither side was true. 3/4 of a mil was way too early. There were no 3 stars after 3/4 of a mil. Let's say, assume it's almost 17 minutes. So 3/4, 17 minutes after sunset in Europe, people did not see 3 stars. Never. They didn't see 3 stars. So it couldn't be that. On the other hand, it also didn't take 4 mil. So the truth seemed to contradict either pshat. It had to be seemed to be somewhere in the middle of that. Somewhere in the middle. So then it comes down to, how do we interpret the Gemara? So if, it's just looking at the Metzias doesn't really support either side. The question is, what's the most reasonable, logical way to interpret the Gemara? And that's, there are many, besides the stira, Taisus has other reasons other reasons to support this idea of Rabbeinu Tam. There's other number of Gemaras that Taisus says we can explain better like that. The Ramban says we can understand how to do Taisus Shabbos better like that. There are many advantages in as far as understanding Gemara into Rabbeinu Tam's pshat. But no one arrived at that pshat just by astronomical observation.
Okay, so now we can turn to the other side. And there's a number of opinions you're going to go through: the Yereim, the Chumas Hadeshen, the Ramal Ashkar, the Minchas Kohen, the Vilna Kohen. There's a number of other opinions.
Yeah. Okay, so let's even talk about the Sefer Yereim. Many people know the Yereim's shita that Shkia is really before sunset. Not many people actually read what it says in the Sefer Yereim, and they would be surprised to see what it actually, how he understood astronomy in the world. Now, the Minchas Kohen analyzes, and he says, listen, this is simply not so. Now, the way it's based on an idea of astronomy, it's just absolutely, we know it's not true. And so we can't even pay attention to it. That's the Minchas Kohen's attitude. People don't share that attitude only because they didn't actually read the Sefer Yereim. So we'll leave that to you to read in this chapter of the Sefer Yereim. It is, I will point out one footnote here, that people have this idea that the reason why we in America we light 18 minutes before Shkia has something to do with Sefer Yereim, who thinks that Shkia is before sunset. It's actually not. That's not the reason for it. And we do not like Minchas. We really follow what the Minchas Kohen says, that it's just not, the Metzias does not fit with the Yereim, and there's no way that it's it's even any suffix Lila before sunset.
Okay, then we can. With everything here, obviously, there's much more in the Sefer. The Sefer really breaks it down and goes in depth through the great, like the title says, the great Zmanim debate, the history, the science, and the lumdas. It's not exactly in that order. There's science, we can mention history. Now we're getting the lumdas and the history. We're mixing both together, so it's all mixed up throughout the Sefer. So then we get to the Maram al-Ashkar.
Right. So one of the good things about the Sefer is that it presents things chronologically. So it's important to know what people knew when. So, for example, we have, many people just have this idea that there's a machlekes, Rabbi Tam and the Gainim, as if Rabbi Tam and the Gainim sat down and thought about this. No, it's not. Obviously, that's not how it worked. The Baalei Tais did not even know what the Gainim held. They had this problem in the Gemara, and they did not know that what the Gainim held. They came up with their theories, how to answer it. But the first sefer that really introduced to the whole world, the latest, the Notis Kelim and Shulchan Aruch, then know the opinion of the Gainim is from the Maram al-Ashkar. The Maram al-Ashkar had access to tshuvas from the Gainim, and that helped him analyze the whole sugya, and he knew what the Rambam says. And he's made clear that according to the Gainim, Shkia is sunset, and 3/4 of a mil after sunset is Vaday Laila, is for sure. There's for sure 3 stars, and that they did not hold like Rabbeinu Tam, like any of the Baalei Tais and the Chacham, and that follow that opinion. So it explains, Maram al-Ashkar, and by putting it into a chronological sequence that helps us understand what happened over here. Why, there was a lot of support for Rabbeinu Tam's opinion. One of the reasons is because no one clearly said otherwise. They didn't know of anyone who clearly said otherwise until Maram al-Ashkar revealed that the Ga'inim's tshuvas clearly say otherwise. And that the Rambam clearly, and the Rambam clearly understood that tzeis occurs 3/4 of a mil after sunset. So,
what's interesting is, this is something that you had mentioned earlier, that if you think about what we're talking about, the Maram al-Ashkar revealed, the Maram al-Ashkar is as part of the Sephardic tradition. He's from Spain, and that's, earlier on, obviously, Christian Spain versus Muslim Spain, but just Spain, and before that you had the Rambam and others. But when you talk about the Yereim, those are Metz and Rabbeinu Tam and the Baalei Tais, that's in Germany, that's the north. So these are Ga'inim, Rishainim, from different countries, different parts of Europe, different cultural milieux, different backgrounds, totally different, and maybe you're seeing some of that is what you're saying when it comes to this Mitzias here. And then, so you did mention the chronological. The only thing is, you do then have, we'll get to the Minchas Kain, the Vilna Gaon, and then the Trumas Hadeshin.
Oh, yeah.
The Trumas Hadeshin is out of order.
He
really belongs before Rosh al-Ashkar, the same kind of area. So he's out of order. I don't know if you want to mention why.
Yeah, well, the reason for that is because, the Trumas Hadeshin, there's really 2 big points to the Zmanim debate. One is this question of what's the 3/4 of a mil does? Are there 2 shkiyas? Is 3/4 of a mil from where? And another is how to divide Shais Manias. That's the Trumas Hadeshin. So first we go chronologically, explain the whole debate about what's the 3/4 of a mil. How does it measure from sunset, or is there a second shkia? And then after that, I bring in the topic of how to divide Shais Manias, which is to a great degree intertwined. So for that, that's the Trumas Hadeshin. That's the Trumas Hadeshin is the famous opinion about that. How the question of dividing, if Shais Manias is divided from Alais until Tzeis, or from sunrise until sunset.
So we'll get to Trumas Hadeshin. You could explain what Shais Manias is. You could explain a little bit to the listeners. But before that, let's go back. Just to finish off this part of the discussion, the Minchas Kain and then the Vilna Gaon's opinion.
All right.
If you want to go back to those,
okay.
Do those first, and then we'll turn to the other part of the Trumas Hadeshin.
So, like I say, the Minchas Kain, thoroughly analyzes this whole sugya point by point, whatever said on it, asking questions, and he had a background in astronomy, and he asked from astronomy, and he actually went and measured. He had a clock, which was we don't realize that people didn't used to have clocks. They couldn't really wait 72 minutes or any fixed minutes. They did not have clocks generally. Minchas Kayin had a clock, and he knew how to observe, and he actually went and tested and he measured things. So he had questions. He had and he analyzed this sugya, and he had a lot of questions on both sides. That we go through that the Minchas Kayin's questions and suggestions, and then the Vilna Gaon. The next step was the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon is pretty short, a couple of Bir Agras, but the Bir Agra basically he sort of solved the whole question by pointing out that the length of Ben Hashmashes is going to varies by latitude and by season. So when the Gemara talks about 3/4 mil, the Gemara has to mean in Bavel and in Eretz Yisrael. And the difference, the seasonal difference at that latitude is very little. It's a couple minutes. But in Europe, it's Ben Hashmashes takes much longer, and the seasonal difference is very different, is much larger. So there's going to be a very big difference when you measure and where you measure. So by introducing this idea and explaining this idea, the guy pointed out that Rabbi Tam, once we know this, then the Rabbi Tam's idea that it took 4 mil in Eretz Yisrael is simply impossible. The guy proves that it's impossible. It's neged achush. So the guy says that that's not true. And he answers basically the really important questions that are posed by the Minchas Kayin and others. He answers them very elegantly. The big question that bothered the Bali Taisis, the big question of the stira, that one Gemara says 3/4 mil, another Gemara says 4 mil. So the Kayin says, well, Tzeisek Havim in halacha, when it ends the day, means the first 3 stars. Gimel Kachavim, the Gemara says, the first 3 stars, very first 3 stars ends the day. But the Gemara that talks about in Psachim says that Tzeis Kachavim occurs 4 mil. That Gemara is measuring the Oivei Rakia. Now, the way the guy explains the astronomy, the fact is that is when all the stars come out. The only way to measure Rakia is the time that all the stars come out. So this big stira that here it says Tzeis Kachavim is 3/4 mil, here it says 4 mil, the guy says an amazingly elegant answer. Tzeis Kachavim, that means the first Gimel Kachavim is 3/4 mil, and Tzeis Kachavim that it's used to measure the Oivei Rakia is when all the stars come out. That's 4 mil. So the guy has very simple, clear, elegant answers, and he points out what's simply scientifically wrong, and there's no point in trying to answer and explain it. He just says it's wrong. So if you don't have to explain the things that are wrong, and you have a few elegant answers to what's right, the guy really enlightens the whole sugya.
Okay, so now we can turn to Trumas Hadeshen and Shalis Manias. You could explain what Shalis Manias is, what that means, and the Trumas Hadeshen's opinion here.
Okay, so to me, a lot of the mitzvahs of the day, till what time is Shachar is, till what time is Man Kriya Shema, it's divided by hours. So the Chazal tells us 3 hours, 4 hours. Mincha is 6.5 hours. Plaga Mincha it's divided by hours. So the Shainim explained that hours here means Shais Manis. Doesn't mean like a standard 1/12 of the day and night, which is our standard hour. It can't mean that because Chatzai Sayim is after 6 hours. So if the day is sometimes 10 hours, sometimes 15 hours, how could Chatzai Sayim be after 6 hours? So if Chatzai Sayim is always after 6 hours, that means that the hours by definition are a fraction of the day. So a day by definition is 12 hours, and a night by definition is 12 hours. So Chatzai Sayim is after 6 hours. So Chatzai Zmani is a certain fraction, seasonal hours we call them. It's a certain fraction of the day. The question then is, how do you divide the day into 12? Do you divide the day from alais, because the mitzvah hayom started our kasher from alais, so it's already yom from alais. So does it go from alais until tzeis hakam? You divide it, and that's a shoyz manias, or the shoyz manias are divided from sunrise to sunset. The 12 of the motion of the sun from sunrise to sunset, that is a shoyz manias. That is a big question. That's negeh for many halachas, and that's a machlekes rishonim. And the Trumas Hadashan's opinion that you divide the shoyz manias by alais till tzeis is based on his understanding that on an average day, let's say at the equinoxes, when the day and the night are equal, there's 12 hours. There's 12 equal hours from sunrise, from alais till tzeis, and from tzeis till alais. That means the time on the day of the equinox in the spring and the fall, the time from alais until tzeis is equal to the time from tzeis until alais. That's the Trumas Hadashan's assumption. And the Lavush and the Gaon says it's just an absolute mistake. It's incorrect. It's just it's not true. So today it's like difficult for us to think how does someone make such a mistake. I mean, anyone that ever looks at a Zmanim chart knows that it's not true. Anyone that has a watch knows that it's not true. Anyone knows that anything basic things knows that in equinox the days are equal from sunrise to sunset, not from alais till tzeis. So we try to explain why the Trumas Hadashan, there's good reasons why the Trumas Hadashan believe like that.
And so this is something also that you dive into really in the last chapter in this section, perfumers and cooks. And you go through kind of what we've been alluding to and mentioning here throughout the episode, that there were Rishonim from different places, and you have some Rishonim and some Achronim from cultures where they studied science and math and other subjects, and they were proficient in this, as opposed to other ones. And you argue that's why you have some Achronim. This is what you said before, the Lavush and the Gaon. They're not, scared to say. They have no problem saying, this is wrong. What this Rishon said, this is incorrect.
Right. This is something very unusual about this sugya. I don't think we find a Bir Agra anywhere else that I know of that writes about some opinion in the Shulchan Aruch that it's a toys, gadol toys, but it's an absolute mistake. There's a lot of things a matter of opinion, and you could not like that. But the Gaon says that it's a mistake, and Kol Sifrei Teichnim, the science books say not like that. This is something that's pretty unique about Zmanim, and it does bother people. There's no question about it. And because I know it bothers people, I try to make it a little easier for people to give a little background, give a little breitkeit to understand how the Rishonim looked at how Gaonim and great people looked at this, so it'll be easier to swallow. But so that's the chapter about perfumers and cooks helps about that, and try to make it. It is a difficult thing. This part of the sugya that we're basically Gedolei Achronim are saying that Rishonim made a mistake it's a difficult part of the sugya, because they're saying you made a mistake in physical reality, and some of it is physical reality that for us is seems like how could you make such a mistake? So that's part of the theme of the book, to explain how wise people could make such a mistake, and why it's not a big deal, that it's nothing to be concerned about, that like the Lavush and the Minchas Kayin and the Vilna Gaon had no hesitation in pointing out mistakes.
Like you're saying, it's very interesting, and it's not the norm. and indeed, it's bothersome to see that if someone can say, no, it's a mistake. It's just flat out wrong, and that's what I was saying before. It's machlekes mitzvahs, so this is either it's this way or this way. It's not both ways. Right. And the guy says it's a toy. It's a mistake. This is just wrong. It's just not correct. So it's a very unique sugya. So and then we really get to the part where today, as you mentioned, it's almost like not almost, they knew more back then than they knew today. Today, people just don't know. You pull out your phone, you look up myzmanim.com, you look up the app. What's the Zman today in Lakewood, New Jersey, or Brooklyn, or Muncie, or wherever we are, Israel, wherever we are. Let's see what time is Zman Kriyasha. When does the fast start? Today you even have... who's Rabbi Tichachinsky? He's the person that makes up the earlier fasting night. No one knows who he was. Everyone just says, it's Ramesh's man is later. Tichachinsky's earlier. That's just what happened today. So it's so easy. We became this new age. You just pull out, you see this Zmanim on demand. You have the sign on your fridge what time Shabbos is. You see it in the newspaper. Whatever. But also another thing is that goes hand in hand with the fact that today the Zmanim are calculated by degrees. Everything is calculated, depending on the opinion that you're going with, but to the exact thing. That's a new thing.
Yeah. Right. I mean, like we say, the Vilna Gaon really enlightens the sugya and sort of like, we could say, solved the sugya over 200 years ago. But even though the Vilna Gaon basically solved all issues in the sugya, but it took a long time till we really actually follow the Vilna Gaon's opinions on things. And a big reason is because people didn't know how to calculate it. Today, I don't know, people don't know either, but they have an app. But you need spherical trigonometry to actually calculate it. So you have to know what's your latitude and what's the day of the season. You have to need a little spherical trigonometry and go calculate it. Who could do that? So this is one of the big obstacles to actually using the Gaon's clarity is that we first had to actually be able to calculate degrees of solar depression for everywhere and anywhere. Today it's a simple thing. Any app could do that. So that's another thing that we point out over here is another big obstacle, of course, is that even after Gaon explained everything, it seemed a wonder to people that it still seemed too early. Even if you say, yes, it goes by Ofek, it only means Eretz Yisrael in the spring. But even in Eretz Yisrael in the spring, it didn't seem like you really see 3 stars 17 minutes after Shkia. That took another step in sophistication. People had to learn a little more. The main thing people had to learn more is to learn about stars. Again, we're so out of tune, we're out of touch. Like I bring here the story of Reb Shlomo Miller, that he said that in Lakewood, in the winter, you always see stars 25 minutes after Shkia. So what? People don't see stars. Rabbanim say it takes longer to see 3 stars. So he laughed. He said, well, these people don't even notice Venus and Jupiter when it's shining. To him, it was the biggest joke. Now, yes, a few hundred years ago, you're a fool. You don't see Jupiter. But who knows what Jupiter looks like today, But it doesn't take that much education. If you spend a few minutes one day when Jupiter's out and take a look at Jupiter, you'll always know what Jupiter looks like. It doesn't take not such a great wisdom. But it's just basics. People are so out of touch. People don't understand how the moon moves. They don't understand how the sun, the stars move across the sky at night, how the picture of the stars changes from night to night. Just basic things that every normal person knew for centuries and centuries. We're just so out of touch. So that people look around, I don't see 3 stars. You not only don't know what stars look like, you don't know what the sky looks like. You don't even know if you should look up or down for the stars. So you have to know something about stars to be in the ballpark to have an opinion if there's 3 stars or not. So today it's easy to know exactly where, what are the brightest stars, the first magnitude stars, where are they? So we explained a little bit about the different stars and what it means to know a little bit about stars. But the people that actually know some basic ideas that were once basic to everybody, what Jupiter looks like and what the first magnitude stars, what their names are and where they appear and how they change from night to night. So then you're not just looking around for stars. You know what you're looking for. And yes, the reality of today, there's no doubt about it. We know that the Gaon is right. The Shmuel is right, the Chazal are right. The way they're going, that 3/4 of a mil 16 and 7 minutes after sunset in Eretz Yisrael in the spring and the fall, you will always see 3 stars.
So, with that, we have to end, at least with the book. I'm going to ask you about your next book. But before we get there, we have to end with realistic Tzeisak Echavim. So the realistic time, 45 and 50 and 60 and 72, when you mentioned Eretz Yisrael. What's realistic Tzeisak Echavim? What can you tell the listeners?
So actually, I'm not on any crusade to try to convince anyone any halacha lamaisa. It's not, to me, like I start off, it's a astronomy book more than a halacha book. This is a huge machlekes, and it's not my position to paskin this halacha and to tell people what to do.
And this is not a halacha podcast, no question. I'm asking more like from the book, from going through this like historically.
Now, if you actually know the astronomy and you know what the Vilna Gaon says and you know the Metzias, then there's nothing to talk about. That at this solar depression of 4.4 degrees, this is Tzeisak Echavim. It's Vadei. Now, and not, again, and not. I'm not going to come here and start arguing with people what they should do, what they shouldn't do. I'll tell you an interesting story. And this is reflective of a lot of people. I was just last week. I was in Eretz Yisrael. I went to visit Rabbi Weiss, and Rabbi tells me he read my sefer. He said, "I read your sefer on Zmanim. It's brilliant. I have to thank you for it, but I don't really like it so much." It bothers me because Lamaisa, I'm Akbar Rabbeinu Tam, and it's like it's something. I'm Akbar Rabbeinu Tam. I read your book, and it's just I'm not happy about it. So I understand exactly what he's coming from. Many people are like that. That it's like part of their frumkeit, part of their Yiddishkeit. That they're Akbar Rabbeinu Tam, and then here you read the Sefer, and it says that that 200 years ago, the Vilna Gaon proved that it's a mistake. It's just 200 years. It's not only that it's a mistake, but the Vilna Gaon proved this more than 200 years ago. It's upsetting. So it's not I'm not out there to get people upset. Do what you want. Avada, Lakula, you can't go, you have to certainly be machmer for the opinion of the Vilna Gaon. But if someone wants to keep longer, I'm not here to tell them what to do.
So in Lakewood, we're in Lakewood. I don't know, we have listeners all over the world, but in Lakewood, what's the time in Lakewood?
So there is a chart over there. I mean, like you say, you can take out your app. Now, if you take out your app, any app will say what's 4.4 degrees, negative 4.4 degrees. That's the Zman. Or some will say, based on the 16, 17 minutes in Yerushalayim, and solar depression. That's it. Now in the winter, it's like 21 minutes, 22 minutes after Shkia. So where it's really relevant is it's just a fast day. Now, usually after Shabbos, what's the rush? Daven Ma'ariv, what are you doing already? But where people are more concerned is they fasted all day, or even if it's not, they can handle it. But they have a wife and kids. People are fasting. If it's still a fast day, it's fine. But if the fast was over half an hour ago, what are you doing to them? So when could you really eat? People want to know the truth. So the truth is like 21 minutes after here in Lakewood, about 21 minutes, check up on your app, maybe 22 minutes after sunset, the fast is over. You could eat. There's nothing, there's like, it not only is it, it to be machmer on that, there are on a kindness that really is till shkia sachama, to be machmer, more than that, is a very extreme chumrah. But I only tell you because you wanted to know. But I say again, I'm not promoting any halacha over here. I'm just trying to teach some astronomy.
Yeah, I'm just asking based, what it would be here, and we should ask you what do you actually keep yourself? But you say people are machmer, Shabbos, Yom Kippur, people are Yom Kippur. It seems like a thing. People do 72. It's like a thing. Yom Kippur, suddenly they're keeping 72. I don't know. I've asked neighbors, we're keeping 72. You keep the whole year 60 or 50. Yom Kippur. Okay, so the whole year Michal Shabbos? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I never understood that one. There's like extra chumrah. I don't know. Maybe some listeners of the podcast will say, well, it's either Shabbos you keep. Shabbos is the same Darais as Yom Kippur. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the difference, but there's like a thing. It's like Yom Kippur. But it's either Metzias, A or B. It's not. Okay, people want to be machmer. Anyways,
I'll tell you, to me, one of the more bizarre things is people are machmer and for Sfiras HaOmer. Every Friday night, they, for Kriyas Shema, for
it's Shabbos. I don't understand.
And Sfiras HaOmer, Mikra din Yaitza ben Shemoshes, and like they come up with Zmanim like they're waiting 45 minutes. What's the gematria? Like, where do you get that from? And
they don't know. The answer is what you say. They don't know. It's even though we started obviously, it's not a complex sugya. But for people that don't know astronomy, don't know the Messias, maybe never went through the sugya also, they never went to yeshiva, it is complicated in that sense. And so they don't understand what they're learning. But, the guy knew everything, wrote his math book. So the guy was like, okay, it's simple, or even the other end. So that's one thing. So let's also point to your haskamas. You do have haskamas, and they say people say, well, who's this haskamas from? What's going on over here with this? So you have haskama from Abshlomo Miller, you have haskama from Rishon Reisman, you have haskama from Ryan Lopyansky. So you do have haskamas, very fine haskamas. But you mentioned about Weiss, and he said, I don't like your book. What has been your response generally to the book? What have people been upset about? He said Rasha told you personally, but have you gotten letters, emails, comments?
I got a huge amount of feedback in this book. I used to get every week a few emails. Now I still get emails, and I get a huge response to this book, and it's overwhelmingly positive. People love the book, and Hasidim, I live in Brook Hill, and I have Hasidic neighbors, and I have good friends who are Hasidim, and I can't say they all like it, but there have been a number of people who were not happy about it, and they said, "Oh no, you don't understand, you're missing something," and I said, "Listen, if I'm missing something, I'm happy to to correct it and for the next printing, but I just need you to write down exactly, send me an email, write exactly, understand the Vilna Gaon's questions have been a time, and what's the answer?" Right? Obviously, nobody has come up with has ever sent me any email defending Rabbeinu Tam or explaining how you can have always 72 minutes without, some are bizarre ideas about what people have. They're not defensible. Now, people have other reasons why, they want to keep Shabbos longer and they want to keep longer Zmanim. I'm not campaigning against it. But the overwhelming response is people very excited about it. And listen, I'll tell you an interesting insight about that. When I first published the Sefer, and I first agreed to, we made a deal to publish the Sefer. So Mosaic Press, they told me, okay, we're going to print, we'll make a thing, we're going to first print 2,000 copies. So I told them, no, you don't have to you don't have to print 2,000 copies, it'll take forever. It's a really niche topic. How many people are interested in really studying the astronomy of this? Publish a few hundred, and let's see how long that takes. So they explained this, Doran Cornwell, the people in Mosaic Press. They said, no, you're making a mistake. You see, you live in Lakewood, you look around Lakewood, and see how many of your friends have the background and the interest to go pay $20 for a book on Zmanim. And there's not, you're right, there's not so many. But that's not your audience. Your audience is intelligent, educated people all over the world. They're going to buy this. Your biggest audience is not in Lakewood. You're going to sell more Sfarim online than you're going to sell in Sfarim stores. And that's the truth. That's what happened. They sold tons of Sfarim, and I get emails from people all over the world. So yes, I get a lot of feedback here in Lakewood, and it's mostly good feedback, and some are not so happy. But my most passionate fans are not in Lakewood. there's doctors and lawyers and a lot of educated people all over the world that send me emails how they love my sefer. So to me, it was like a new audience that I met, and that was one of the many fun things about publishing a sefer is you get to make new friends all over, and Baruch Hashem was good response.
So as you said, you're not a Paisik, you're not pasking here and this is not Halacha podcast. As I said, everyone should ask their local Orthodox rabbi and follow their family's minhag and not pasking based on a podcast. But what was your purpose of writing the Sefer? Was it to educate the masses, to tell people? And who is this book meant for? You said it's meant for just a highly educated public. What were you trying to do with the book?
I'll tell you again. I was trying to share some knowledge of astronomy. That was my main thing. Now, if you know astronomy, then you know Zmanim, because that's what it is. Once you know the astronomy, the whole sugya is clear. But what people don't know, what not enough people know, and was beneficial to them to know, is astronomy. And so I a lot of people, some people feel bad that they don't understand astronomy. They feel they don't have the Mudechol background. They don't have the English education. And they don't get the astronomy. If other people work hard on it, but a lot of people learned the astronomy from it, and just astronomy. I have many people that are so thankful for the Sefer just for the astronomy. Even some people that don't understand the Sugya Zmanim, they're all excited about the astronomy. So it's my actually, to be honest, I wrote the first draft of this Sefer was not only about Zmanim, was astronomy, how it affects Kiddush HaChodesh, how it affects Mazolas, how it affects a lot of different topics. So it explained a lot more astronomy. And then a wise person advised me that that's not the way to make a book. You have to focus on one topic that people are interested in. And very few people are interested in Kiddush HaChodesh and things like that. So just stick to the astronomy that's relevant to Zmanim. Just go to the Sugya Zmanim, and you'll. That's what I did. But there is, somewhere in the back of the thing, there's astronomy about stars and about the moon that one day maybe will see the light of day.
So your next book, coming out soon, we should mention, is the great Shiurim debate.
Yes.
And
very excited about that.
Yeah, we'll save that in Mitzvah Shem for a podcast episode when that comes out. But just in the minute, brief description for the listeners of what that book's going to be about.
So that the setup of the book, is you see, it copies the name because it's the Great Shiurim Debate, so it's the same type of setup that is trying to give factual metzias information onto a very relevant topic. So today, everyone knows there's a shiurim. How much is a kazayas? How much is a kabeya? How much is a raviyas? So you have the Chazon Ish shiur and Chaim Notis shiur. Now, everybody knows that. Now, if you ask almost any Talmud Chacham here in Lakewood, tell me, what's the Chazon Ish's rayas? What's the Chazon Ish's rayas? What's Reb Chaim Notis rayas? They don't know. How many people know? This is such a basic topic. But then it's a huge machlekes between Chaim Noah and Chazon Ish. So it's a huge machlekes. What are their proofs? What are they arguing about? People have no idea. And it's not a mystery. There's Svarim about it. The Chazon Ish wrote about it. The Stipler wrote about it. Just read the Svarim. And yet people don't know what it is. And if people did know, they would realize that many of the proofs that they're trying to bring historical proofs, archaeological proofs. They're trying to bring proofs that need research. And since then, a lot of research has been done. It's not my research. A lot of research has been done into basically the proofs that Gedolei Ahron dealt with. And today, we really have a clarity, and we really have proofs for every shear. We know how much a shekel weighed in the time of Bayis Sheni. We know the shekel, the Rambam, and the Gainim. We know the Am and the Tefach of the Rambam and the Gainim. we know Revius and Asa. We know exactly the Shurim of the Rambam, the Ga'inim. We know it from Bayis Sheni, the Shurim. There's not a doubt today. It's a topic that's been solved. In a way, there's a similarity in the sort of the theme between Zmanim and Shurim is that, they say Zmanim, the Sephardic Yidden it was never the minig to do like Rabbeinu Tam. They did 3/4 of a mil. They did like the Ga'inim. It was Yidden in Europe that were out of, the Metzias seemed different to them, and they were out of touch, and they sort of lost that. They went off track, and till today. Now today we really discovered that basically what's been the Sephardi minhagim of the people living in Eretz Yisrael all the years. That's the truth. And the same is a very similar idea to Shiurim, that people moved to Europe, to places where there were no olives, and the eggs were actually different size because there was different chickens and a different climate, and things were different. They lost touch. They lost them entirely. They didn't have the same chicken eggs, and they didn't have the same olives, and they didn't have the same items. But the Yidden living in the Sephardim, they kept up a Messiah much better about that. And today we know that their Messiah is much more accurate. Today we know so that's the theme of the Shurim debate. And I told Mosaic Press they really have to get it out before people start buying their wine and their matzahs. They'll save them money. But I don't know when it'll be out, but we're looking forward to that.
Okay, we'll keep everyone posted. So I'll link to the book. You can purchase the book. It's The Great Zmanim Debate. It's a hardcover book. You can buy it $19.99, about 200 pages, so you can check that out. It'll be in the show notes. I also want to thank, once again, 1010 Watches, my good friend Moshe Cohn, for sponsoring this episode. And I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, so they're located in Jackson, New Jersey, right next to Aisle 9 Jackson, so basically Lakewood. If anyone's interested, and you can always reach out to them, and they really have a really good selection, really nice selection of watches and timepieces, and that fits appropriately with this podcast about Zmanim. And thank you, Rabbi Ahron, for joining me to discuss Zmanim. Hopefully the listeners found that enlightening and interesting. Anyone who has emails and comments and feedback, what's the email? Where can they reach out with any comments?
In my sefer, in the beginning, there is email address. It says the author could be contact anotissefer@gmail, ANOTISSEFER, anotissefer@gmail.com.
I'll put in the show notes also for those interested, that they can reach out to you and they can let me know what they thought, and I could also pass it along, but they can read out, like you said, anotissefer@gmail.com. I'll put in the show notes together with a link to purchase the book. And
okay, thank you, Rabbi Nachy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.